It's interesting that Asajj Ventress, being a nightsister, didn't have as much experience with Sith sorcery as Darth Zannah did. Still, Ventress made good use of her combative force abilities, utilizing raw ability with finesse. However, Zannah was also competent enough to contend with Ventress's power and finesse. I would not place Ventress's raw ability with Bane, and Zannah has displayed an ability to defend against his powers. What's more, Zannah's use of Shatterpoint and Precog would allow her to take notice of any trickery Ventress might throw at her. But the true trump card is Zannah's Sith sorcery. She could torture the minds of even level-headed beings. Against Ventress, it would be almost too easy. Ventress has always been plagued by her past, losing her Jedi Master at an early age, casted off by the Sith, witnessing the death of her fellow Nightsisters. She simply had too much baggage that Zannah would exploit to her benefit. With a comfortable margin, I give Zannah the edge for her force abilities. Asajj Ventress was a daunting duelist, even before her training under Count Dooku. As an unofficial Jedi Padawan, I believe Kai Nerek taught her in the ways of Ataru. Ataru was the fourth form of lightsaber combat, utilizing flamboyant feints to outmaneuver one's opponents. But after her master's death, I believe she divulged into a more freestyle technique without much guidance. Though she would begin fighting with two lightsabers, I do not think she was a practiced Jar-Kai user until later. Still, her unrefined style would be enough to fight as Anakin Skywalker's equal for several minutes, though she would find out the weaknesses of dual blade fencing. The lack of kinetic energy behind her blocks and strikes withered under Skywalker's assault. Her skill with Jar-Kai would only be enhanced when she received official training under Count Dooku. Dooku would teach her the ways of Form 2 Makashi, a form based around back-and-forth fencing principles. This would allow Ventress to work around her opponent's guards when she could not power through, allowing her more pinpoint precision. Even so, she will be criticized for her sloppy form by Luminara and Dully, though I'm not really sure how you can criticize someone when they're kicking your ass. But her training in Makashi would eventually allow her to scar Anakin Skywalker in one of their final duels, outmaneuvering his guard. But her most significant showing would be against Mace Windu, where she not only challenged the council member, but forced him to utilize all his skills to get the upper hand. Asajj Ventress could only be outfenced by top-tier duelists, contending with Anakin Skywalker, Mace Windu, General Grievous, Sora Bulk, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, and many others. But more often than not, her greatest enemy was herself. Ventress was a troubled individual, always plagued by her tortured past and her somewhat lacking self-esteem. Sometimes, this lack of confidence would seep into her dueling abilities, which indeed made her sloppy. Regardless, Asajj Ventress was one of the most infamous duelists of her era, racking as many Jedi kills as General Grievous, able to challenge the best of her time. Under the instruction of Darth Bane, and after thousands of hours of training in all lightsaber forms, Darth Zannah would be trained for battles of attrition rather than superior strength. Though Bane was a Form 5 specialist, employing the stronger uses of the form, he advised Zannah against it. Instead, he would train her in the ways of Sarisu, the all-defensive form, used with tight and efficient movements to cover each of one's flanks. There are usually two ways that someone employs Sarisu, either through a stonewall defense or through tactical redirection. Darth Zannah would fall under the latter, keeping her opponents at bay, redirecting their strikes and their weight. With this in mind, she waited for her opponent to give into fatigue or make a mistake, leaving herself fresh for the counter. She utilized a saber staff with shorter blades, sacrificing leverage for what has been described as an impenetrable defense. She would often encase herself in a circular motion of her staff, always ready for her signature deflections. In her fight with the battle-meditated Asajj and Johan Othon, she masterfully deflected their strikes, playing them off one another. She had the tactical insight to determine that Johan was the weaker of the two opponents, playing him off of Sorrow, forcing him to get in the way. But once Johan removed himself from the fight, Zannah had trouble repelling the powerful strikes of Sorrow, withering under his assault. And let us not forget that Sorrow was a battle master, one of the Jedi's best, under the influence of battle meditation. Surviving under his assault would be no mean feat. This particular duel is a showcase of Zannah's strength and failings. She definitely had the know-how to defend against two battle-meditated Jedi, but if an offensive opening never showed itself, she failed to create an offense of her own. Still, her strategy did work very well against Set Darth. Darth was a practitioner of Ataru, one of the more physically demanding forms. At the outside of the fight he took the offensive, but eventually he tired. Once he did, Zannah defeated him with her Sith sorcery. But again, she would showcase her inability to press an offensive sequence against her opponents. In the two final duels she had with Darth Bane, she was unable to press an offensive advantage against her master, even while he was unarmed in their first bout. Still, Zannah was able to defend against her powerful master in their last duel, though she barely survived his vicious attacks. Essentially, Zannah was very dangerous against competent or intermediate opponents. However, those who could match her skill or outmuscle her defenses forced her to delay the inevitable. This round is also rather conclusive. Yes, Zannah could certainly repel Ventress's attacks. Ventress was fast, but Zannah could match her speed, and Asajj didn't pack much of a punch behind her strikes, favoring Jar Kai and Makashi, two forms of lightsaber combat that were not noted for their strength. However, Zannah would not be able to press a definitive offense against Ventress either. Her use of Sarisu was great at marathon-style fights, but it would do no good against an opponent like Ventress. For me, it was more likely that Ventress would get the edge for her lightsaber abilities. She has outdueled several Jedi Knights and challenged the best of the Jedi Council. At best, Zannah staved off Asajj and Darth Bane, which is notable but not as comparable to Asajj Ventress, who could muster up a competent offense against her own foes. For this, I give Asajj Ventress the somewhat comfortable edge for her dueling abilities. The fight between Asajj Ventress and Darth Zannah would be an engagement of the physical and the metaphysical. They were nearly on par with regards to their physiques, but Ventress had better showings in a physical sense. Asajj was a fantastic force wielder, using it with power and precision, but against Zannah, she would be far too susceptible to her Sith sorcery. They were both accomplished duelists in their own right, but Asajj seemed to fare better in a straight-up bout of the blades. Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place on the bridges of Kashyyyk. As a final tally, I would say the advantage to the victor goes 8-10. The following is a hypothesis of one of the majority victories. I think it's fair to say that Ventress would start the attack, raining quick strikes and stabs against Zannah. As was typical of Darth Zannah, she would fall to her defensive posturing, creating a perfect circle of defense with her lightsabers. Asajj's strikes would come fast, but Zannah would manage to redirect all her strikes through swift parries. Before long, Asajj would start flinging branches at Zannah, turning up the bridge below them. But Zannah would anticipate each of her strikes through her precognition, so Asajj turns up the speed, accelerating with a vicious flurry of strikes. She nearly scores Zannah across the thigh, but misses. Zannah will become overwhelmed, taking a few kicks to the gut or punches across the face. At the end of one of her sequences, Asajj blasts Zannah with a force push. Zannah would stonewall the blast, turning on her heel, flinging out her fingers in a complex pattern. Suddenly, Asajj would stop in her tracks, clutching her head. She would see visions of her past, the death of Kyneric, the rejection of Count Dooku, and the destruction of the Nightsisters. All Zannah needed was a second, but Ventress would give her far more. With a quick flick of her wrist, Zannah would strike through Ventress's heart. The visions would pass, but Asajj would be dead. And thus, I declare Darth Zannah, the Dark Lady of the Sith, the victor. Of course, this is all my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment sections below. Do you agree that Zannah's Sith sorcery is a trump card against Ventress? Or do you think Ventress could have taken a majority? And of course, peace, love, and may the Force be with you. Always. They both held immense power with their use of the Force, Yoda as the Avatar of Light, Bane as the Nexus of the Dark. No, why are you mowing your lawn right now? I'm recording a Let's Play.